Back in the early 2000s, the Xbox was in an experimental phase where everyone was just throwing ideas at the wall to see what would stick. You had Blinks, you had Brute Force, you had the early days of Xbox Live, and right in the middle of it all, we have Magic the Gathering quietly dropping one of the strangest spin-offs ever made. But what's wild is that it really felt like it should have worked. This wasn't a cheap tie-in or a rushed cash grab. There were real ideas behind it. It was trying something genuinely forward-thinking, but instead, it ended up fading into obscurity. No one really talks about it, no one remembers it, and if you weren't there in 2003, you probably don't even know this thing existed. We're talking about Magic the Gathering Battlegrounds. Now let me rewind a bit and explain what the game actually is, because the odds that you've played it or even seen it are probably slim. Battlegrounds released in 2003 for the original Xbox and PC only. It was published by Atari while licensed by Wizards of the Coast, and from the outside you'd assume it was just another attempt to bring the Magic card game to consoles, but that's not what it is at all. As you guys probably know, I love both retro video games and Magic the Gathering as it exists as a card game. So believe me when I say this thing barely resembles Magic as we know it. Battlegrounds is a real-time arena-style dueling game. You pick a duelist, customize a set of spells, not a deck, just a mini loadout, and then jump into a battlefield where both players run around casting spells, summoning creatures, fighting over mana again and again, all in real time. The cool thing about Battlegrounds is that a lot of the design was genuinely ahead of its time. Like, you drop this exact idea onto modern hardware with some polish and matchmaking and it would be a banger. For one, the real-time spell casting was kind of brilliant. This was a year before World of Warcraft popularized their cooldown system, a year before Dota All-Stars became the prototype for modern MOBAs, and a long while before card-based video games really started gaining popularity. But in 2003, people didn't know what to do with this. It was pretty different. These game mechanics are all at the forefront of Battlegrounds. Your mana has cooldown, your spells have cooldown, and positions and timing of your creature summons dictate which enemy units they engage with, almost feeling like you need lane control. Circling back to the mana system, instead of drawing lands like in the TCG, you physically run around the arena and capture mana orbs, which produce mana over time. The catch, though, is that your opponent can steal your orbs, so area control, spacing, movement, these all get caught up in the flow of the game. And like I said before, with your spacing and movement, the position and timing of summoning creatures makes for some pretty engaging gameplay. Matches are also short, usually 2 to 3 minutes if I had to guesstimate, which made them perfect for online play. And keep in mind, this was released only a year after Xbox Live launched. Fast matches, small skill-based kits, starting players on even footing, you can see the ambition here. There are bones of a pretty gnarly competitive game here. And honestly, the limited spell loadout was a really good idea to this end. Before each match, you pick a handful of spells to bring to the battle, and that's your entire kit. No randomness, no deck shuffling, no artificial mana strew. You just need to make sure you have the tools to win and the tools to counter your opponent's strategy. But it's not all unicorns and rainbows. Here's the thing. For every idea that was ahead of its time, there was a problem waiting to drag the whole thing down. So what are the issues? The first and most obvious one is that Magic fans back in 2003 didn't like it. And this isn't speculation, it's documented. Reviews at the time made this point over and over. IGN's original review of the game gave it a 6.5, saying it strips away much of the strategy that Magic fans enjoy. GameSpot gave it a 6.3, noting that it may be too far removed from the card game to satisfy longtime fans. Even user reviews from the era say the same thing. Cool idea, but not Magic, and honestly, that's fair. Magic players might have come to this expecting spells, decks, synergies, card advantage. Instead, they got a true RTS with some Magic paint on it. However, gamers that would typically enjoy this style of game didn't take to it either. Common complaints were that the controls were stiff, movement was a little floaty, and it's hard to hit mobs with your melee attack. Even in 2003, reviewers pointed this out. GameSpy called the combat awkward, and several early forum posts complained about the game feeling clunky or unfinished. The game lived in a weird no man's land where it wasn't strategic enough for card game fans and not smooth enough for action game fans. Some complain about the spell selecting system, saying it's confusing. I get where they're coming from, but after playing the game for a while, it's actually pretty easy. Sure, the controls can be a touch clunky, but actually casting them mid-game, you get used to it. However, the difficulty curve didn't help the game on release either. Battlegrounds has a lengthy tutorial, which is basically just the single-player campaign, but it barely explains anything important outside of the controls, and it spikes in difficulty extremely quickly. Multiple reviewers, including Team Xbox Review, which scored the game a 6.8, said the same thing. The AI was brutally punishing. And for a game targeting console players who probably hadn't played Magic before, that was an immediate retention killer. Most people didn't stick around long enough to get good at it. And then there is the spell balance, which can be rough. While you could metagame, certain summons were just so strong that people could basically lock you out of the match if you didn't know what you were doing. Even the campaign, like I mentioned before, can get randomly damn near impossible at times due to this lack of balancing. This all contributed to the one factor that ultimately sealed the game's fate, it just didn't sell. Now, to be clear, Atari never officially released sales numbers, so we'll never see a neat chart confirming how badly it performed, but we can still piece together the picture with the historical price of the game, and that of course there was never a sequel, even though the game structure clearly set it up for one. But here's another twist. For as quickly as it vanished, Battlegrounds was genuinely ahead of its time. Looking back now, so many of its ideas feel modern. Real-time ability cooldowns, every competitive game has that. Loadout-based combat kits, that's how hero shooters work. Objective control and resources, that's the backbone of MOBAs. Short, intense matches, that's literally how modern matchmaking stays alive. Sure, some of these are a bit of a stretch, but you get what I'm saying. It's one of those games where if someone resurrected the concept today, fixed the controls, smoothed out the balancing, added proper matchmaking, and gave it a visual overhaul, I think people would eat it up. I imagine this could cultivate a pretty awesome, albeit niche, competitive scene. But in 2003, it was just a little too strange, too different, and honestly just too early. Magic players weren't ready for it, and gamers more broadly weren't sure what it is beyond generally flawed. So where does that leave Battlegrounds today? Pretty much as a lost experiment. A weird, ambitious idea from a time when publishers were much more willing to take risks on strange spin-offs. It has a tiny cult following, and I'm part of it, but it's mostly made of retro game collectors like myself, and the type of people that would remember accidentally renting it from a Blockbuster or something like that. This game should have worked, it just didn't land. But looking back, 2 decades later, you can see the blueprint of something clever here, something that maybe deserves a second chance.